I'm not going to get into what I know or what I don't know. Here's what I know.
No one is the suppository of all wisdom.
Hey everyone, it's me, Luke Stickels for Dysatisfunctional TV. Check this out, we've got some racism here in inner Melbourne, West Melbourne, with an Airbnb host telling these two young women they can't receive them if they're black and to please excuse them for not accepting black people. It's interesting because it's that really bizarre, polite, and also very passive-aggressive, it's not our fault kind of racism. It's bad for other reasons. We're going to do this in 4 videos over the next week or so. Right here, right now, we'll go over what happened, do a bit of analysis, especially the legendary qualities of the young woman trying to book a holiday and the kind of qualities of the racism, how it was flavoured for the current time. Part 2 will cover some of the twits reactions to kind of frame the issues and some media coverage to see what happened next. Then in the 3rd video, we'll show some footage of how me and my niece went down to the building for some direct action reconnaissance a week ago, and we'll wrap up. All through the lot, we'll talk about racism in general, and we might end up busting a few Melbourne myths along the way. Let's get into it. Here's the tweet. Is this baby girl Sadia? I think so. Story came out on Twitter where 19-year-old Sadia Muhammad and her sister were looking to visit Melbourne for a holiday. Pretty gross stuff if you're having a look there. Hi, Libin. Thank you so much. If you are black, please forgive us for not receiving you. Just bizarre message. Okay, give me my money back right now because I'm black. Fair reaction. You can just apply to platform, return it, and thank you with the the real jolly kind of exclamation mark. Thank you. We don't need a racism anyway, but we don't need it that way. And you got to love Sadia's reply straight away, like 5 minutes later. I do not appreciate this at all. This is pure racism in caps. In a time like today, especially, I'll be sure to report you immediately. For someone to be hosting on a major platform such as this, such discrimination is not acceptable. Now, that is fantastic response. And I just think that's speaks so much to her character. Pretty gross stuff for this to be happening, and might come as a shock to some. It really shouldn't, but it might, because we tend to tell ourselves such great things about ourselves as a society and stuff. But to me, I'm not shocked. Melbourne, some people think of it as a multicultural place, but it is definitely different to the rest of Australia. But there's serious problems here. So Helen's style and Sadia's reaction are really worth focusing on a little bit here. Helen being super passive aggressive, and note the way she makes it sound like her hands are tied and she's taking up this sort of don't shoot the messenger kind of policy, like it's not really coming from her. Let's click into it. Here's her response to what we read out from Sadia before. I'm not discriminating against anyone. We really don't have the ability to deal with this because it's happened more than once. And I'm sorry because the whole building is like this and the building management just gave us an ultimatum. Thanks. And then this is a weird one. Respect is not hard. It comes from everyone's upbringing, and I don't want to do that. Thanks. Look, I mean, we've even got to translate this conversation to English auto cue. It is difficult to figure out what exactly Helen is sort of trying to argue there. It sounds like she's trying to pass the buck and say that the building management or body corporate of owners are saying that this is their policy. And that was sort of what I went there to kind of figure out myself. But I don't think it really came down to that. By the end of the little recon there, I decided that wasn't happening at all. Got to credit Sadia with calling this out right away. She was obviously raised right, did not blink, did not delay. And she's able to stand up for herself and put the onus of this problem back onto the person and say, thank you for that gift. I don't receive it. Here you go. And also letting Helen know that she's fully aware that that major platforms cannot do this kind of thing now. And actually that's like a vulnerability for Helen and for Everhome Melbourne Village. It's a vulnerability that Sadia is able to take advantage of. Might sound obvious that someone would want to stick up for themselves and call out that racism, but a surprising number of people won't do that given the opportunity. We're complicated beings and people will internalize criticism or prejudice and take it on. And you can, you hear about people in a whole bunch of different groups like developing kind of self-loathing. In the TV series Lovecraft Country, that explores like the self-loathing of being black because of all this negative attention. And even though they're these strong characters who speak up for themselves and represent for themselves and their people and their family and their community, there's still like a bizarre sort of psychosocial thing that goes on of like internalizing. So this kind of like racist stuff is so deeply hurtful and wounding. And to me, this isn't sort of empty virtue signaling. This is real stuff. Someone wanting to come and take a holiday can't because of racism. Literally, that's sort of impinging on their liberty and the sort of equality of the society that we live in. So that just fucking sucks. So it's very understandable if someone would internalize it and not be able to stand up for themselves in that moment. And some people like just would not be able to like express their values. They would be so shocked and confronted that they wouldn't be able to sort of demonstrate that pushback right away. So you've just got to love Sadia's response, that she come back swinging right away and wouldn't take that passive-aggressive stuff from Helen at all. Now, look, I don't know if this is ironic or not. I've got a feeling that English might not be Helen's first language. Just speculation, I could be wrong, but those sentences don't really make sense, and they're kind of a bit elusive and almost poetic and associative. We can't really clearly see what she's talking about. The Body Corporate is a big Chinese company with Chinese language to a primary Chinese language speakers in the entrance hall there, first and foremost. I don't know if that says anything about where Helen's coming from or what her background is. I have seen some racism towards Black people from Chinese business owners in the past. In Japan, when I lived there was a sort of a new pop culture trend that was bucking the general racism towards Black people, of seeing them as being on the sort of bottom of society in terms of like global races and stuff. Just a norm of being very denigrating towards Black people, and just quite disgusting to see, and especially to see it sort of expressed quite casually. And there's also a thing in Asian culture about pale versus darker skin. I think darker skin means like you're working in fields and you're like lower class and stuff. And I'm not sure what's going on there. There's a whole bunch of like skin whitening and things like that going on there. So look, wherever Helen is from, there's no doubt that white people whose ancestors have stolen land in the past do racism better and more fiercely than anyone. Like that's not in question. Most racism in Melbourne and Australia is really by like later generations of white colonials who feel a need to repress our violent colonial background. And we can understand it in this kind of weird psychosocial way, as I said, but repressing the reality of racism is absolutely toxic to First Nations people and to people from migrant communities, where they're immediately treated differently because of the colour of their skin. So there are some like moderate liberals in this country that like to think racist atrocities are in the past, or that they're exaggerated, or that they don't reflect commonly shared values. That's sort of that bad apple kind of thing that, call into question the rest of the apples in the barrel or whatever. That is clearly massive BS. There's a lot of documentary records, letters and things written about non-white people in Australia, even the history of laws in this country for like committing ethnocide and watering down and breeding out Aboriginality in Australian society after colonial invasion, where it's very clear that racism has not been overplayed and overstated. If anything, it's been underplayed and understated. Like for instance, it wasn't until 1967, which is like my parents' leading adult lives then, the referendum there at the election, where a decision was made to count First Nations people as part of the population of Australia. So, the documentary record speaks very clearly about the degree and effect and multi-generational kind of impact of racism. So these things aren't really up for debate. When you hear someone trying to water it down, we've got to sort of show how the record speaks for itself and that it's a serious problem and still is currently. These things aren't safely removed off in the past, that we've all learned and grown, that racist things are still happening every day in situations like this and many others too. So when you meet kind of these self-styled moderates, they're not really moderate. They're usually status quo apologists and corporate extremists. So they don't really ever occupy the centre that they kind of pitch and claim that they do. They can either be thoughtful and critical. In that case, I think it comes from quite a vindictive place, or a real dog-eat-dog sort of mentality, Malthusian view of society. But if they're kind of that more, and this is a lot more common, I think, kind of thoughtless and uncritical in the way they live, and their view might just be kind of laziness and ignorance, and a lack of curiosity. That first group need to be fought tooth and nail, but the second group can be brought out of their kind of tunnel view of life. We can bring them onto our side if we're not total dicks to them or talk down to them, which I definitely do all the time. Many on the left can do that without thinking, because the left is kind of dumb with that stuff, and has this aspirational culture of it. It should be like this. and then sort of can get very like militant in telling people how it should be, and not brooking any kind of like learning or growing or changing. And, you know, we have all this sort of cancel culture stuff. Anyway, lots of people who are racist in Australia do talk and write as though English is not their first language. So the main trouble for these guys is that they don't have another language in the quiver that they're better at or even competent at. So that's a problem for them, and probably doesn't help them be less racist if they're, you know, missing out on a job and or an opportunity, and it goes to, you know, someone who doesn't look like them. So, you know, that's what you get for being like super dumb. You know, stay in school, try to read books and use your words all the time. There's a lot of different social factors that feed into this problem, where people, based on who they hang out with, like I spent some time living on the Sunshine Coast, and there were just different norms for like tolerating racism and casual comments and so on about race that were, you know, pretty disgusting. And I was sort of pushed me to find ways to kind of intervene and say things and just interrupt, and not be aggressive, but just to interrupt the dynamic and the norm. I always think about modeling, like if there were other people who were listening in who thought it wasn't right but didn't know what to say, well, they could see me intervene and change that dynamic and maybe say, oh, that's a way of doing it. So modeling that kind of behavior, I think that's not empty virtue signaling. That is where we are sort of learning in good faith from each other. And even people who are saying stuff because they're just parroting things that probably their parents said or their social group said. If someone intervenes and says, you can't speak like that, or you can't make a decision like what's her name Helen's made here, then we get these opportunities to kind of think a bit and deprogram ourselves from some of these toxic automatic thoughts. It's not like I'm intervening in those situations because I'm better or because I'm from Melbourne. It's because I am born to be a pain in your ass, first and foremost. And it's me kind of trying to leverage the privilege that I have of being sort of like a mouthy white dude who's had opportunities to kind of deprogram myself and reconstruct my sort of previous more ignorant versions of myself. So there's nothing special about Melbourne as a racism-free city. There's probably, because it's so multicultural, there may very well be more opportunities for those kinds of racist flashpoints or for misunderstanding. There could be some misunderstanding here as we investigate in our future videos. But certainly as we close off this video, I might suggest that Melbourne has this racist issue now with the Airbnb because of its tourism, and because of who owns private property and land in this country, and who gets to make these decisions or think that they can make these decisions that supersede humanist norms and values of tolerance and so on. There's a lot we don't know about Helen and about the Body Corp and the owners. However, what we do know is that on the basis of their ownership of this private property and thinking that that's something within their control, the colour of the skin of the people who are paying them perfectly good money, they're mistaken about that. If you're someone out there who is used to responding to dog whistles on the internet, you know, I can't make clear enough that if Helen is not a white Australian, certainly Australia sets up the conditions where perhaps she thinks that she can get away with this one. And we'll see in future videos that she absolutely could not and did not get away with it in this case. Thanks for joining us for this first little part of our investigation. There's 3 more videos to come, so if you're interested in this, keep an eye out for those, and they'll be part of a big playlist at the end. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends, share with your friends, send them links. Especially, I guarantee the weirdest friend you've got might be into this video. So thanks for tuning in. Keep an eye out for the next video and stay safe. Be good, huh? Bye-bye.